let's go backwards here. This doesn't do anything, as Mike said, about the influx of all of these illegal guns daily coming across the line in Illinois. I mean, Thomas, it's a real problem.
Oh, this makes for a wonderful press conference. But once again, we have a piece of gun legislation that is actually focused on legal gun owners, and it actually hits people who legally own weapons. But these gang members, these drug dealers, and the folks who are committing these crimes and killing people in Chicago every single day, they're not going to a gun shop. They're not going to a gun store.
Right.
So these are the types of things that need to be
This stuff gets
on.
essentially bartered and bought out on the streets, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. And the guns come through by the thousands, And so once again, I think this is misplaced energy.
Here's the problem, Jeanne. How do you enforce this against the very people that Thomas was talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the enforcement is going to be an issue, but I take a little exception to the idea that you don't do something because there's another problem. I mean, I agree with you. I would like to see tougher regulation. I would like them to be tougher on the criminals and the people who don't own guns legally. I think we all would like to see that. But that doesn't mean you don't have in place notification to authorities if your gun is stolen or misplaced or what have you. That doesn't mean you don't give gun owners the responsibility of doing background checks if they're going to sell those guns. So this idea, that we hear all the time that you don't do one thing because we have another problem over here, to me doesn't ring true. I don't get that logic, right?
It's always been, as Jeanne points out, it's been described as a loophole. The gun show loophole. You can go to gun shows, but you can't go to a gun store and evade all of these requirements on reporting and so forth. So what about that? I mean, it does close a loophole, and a great many sales are made at these gun shows.
You know what? Some people would say that it does. And look, a lot of people would argue if you lose a gun, maybe you should notify the police department, right?
Why not?
Okay, absolutely. But again, this is government with misplacing its energy. Right? Yeah. Why are these kids? We're not doing anything to try and get these kids off the street. We're not doing anything to try and get the illegal guns off the street. And more importantly, when you look at the economy of Chicago and the economy of Illinois, which is so unfriendly to business, you can understand why these kids join gangs, because they can't get jobs. Right. They don't have any skin in the game, and nobody wants to talk about that. It's very easy to hold a press conference and come up with some new gun regulation and say we don't have good gun laws. It's another to try and solve the root cause of the problem.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think we could do a lot more to help young people get jobs, and I think we could do a lot more to keep them off the street, and I think we could do a lot more in a lot of areas. But I go back to the point, does that mean you don't do this one thing, which seems to make logical sense? Now, I think your point is well taken. If this doesn't go federal, if this is not a national issue, if this isn't legislation that's passed nationally, it might, not be effective or as effective as it could be. So I do think that's problematic. But, you can't hold the governor of Illinois responsible for nationwide legislation. So you've got to start somewhere. And
How about
then,
this? Why did Chicago needs to start engaging the way New York City did, the doctrine of stop and frisk.
Proactive policing tactics.
Yeah. I mean, in New York, and of course, it's come under fire from a federal judge, but it's on appeal, they have gone from 2,262 murders a year to 417, largely because of the stop and frisk policy. And, the Supreme Court said in the famous Terry case back in 1968, Terry versus Ohio, it's not a violation of the Fourth Amendment when an officer stops and frisks somebody if that officer has a reasonable belief the person may be armed. Maybe Chicago needs to do that.
Right. Look, you've got a governor and you've got a mayor who are both reeling. They've got a city that's in free fall. They've got a state they've managed to tax everything that moves and everything that doesn't, and they're still billions in the red. And so this is another attempt on the part of these officials to call guns a plague and to try and make it look like they're doing something when they're not actually getting to the root cause of the problem.
Most police officers who are experienced will tell you it's not about racial profiling, this stop and frisk. It's about behavior. An experienced cop can tell just by the way an individual is acting, whether he's armed or not, whether he's shifting his waistband and, the way he's sort of walking or shuffling, the eye contact and so on and so forth. Just general behavior that experienced cops know about. Give police more tools to go after these guys with guns.
Well, that
yeah, no, I was going to say, I agree. I think there should be. I mean, I think Ray Kelly was out over the weekend talking about the last 11 years, the substantial decrease in crime as a result of the work during the Bloomberg administration that he's led. And I think proactive policing, if it's done right and it's, you know, it doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment, I think absolutely should be practiced. I think that's got to go hand in hand with something Thomas said. You've also got to give people economic opportunities. I mean, we have a Congress coming back facing this issue of sequester once again. We have drastic cuts in programs. Those are the kind of things we need to tackle. So I absolutely agree. It's not just one thing or the other. It's not just this law that the governor of Illinois passed. It's not just stop and frisk. It's a whole combination of elements. And, you know, unless we get a Congress that can actually operate, none of this is going to go into place. So, you know, I'm not particularly, you know, optimistic it's going to happen, but I would absolutely agree. As long as stop and frisk is done correctly, as long as it's done legally, I don't see any problem with proactive policing. And, you know, I think that we're going to see on appeal some of the points that Ray Kelly has made and the Bloomberg administration has made about, you know, what they see as problematic about the judge's decision last week.